Welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast, the podcast that gives you immediate actions you can take to start seeing life-shifting results now. Hey everybody, welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast. This is Mark Cardone
and Theron Feidt.
So we're here for our 7 Qualities of a Leader, Part 3. And today, one of my favorites. Every great leader I've met, people say they're such a good human. And I think a big part of that, being a good human, is the quality of empathy.
Yes, it is. Yep. And don't confuse empathy with sympathy, because they're definitely different. Empathy is that understanding. Sympathy is feeling what they're feeling. Not that there's not a place for that. However, what we're talking about being a leader is understanding the people that you're leading and truly understanding them. And I think these steps that we have will definitely fill in some gaps. You know, some of them, of course, if you're a leader, you've heard this before. But successful people don't need to be told what to do. But sometimes they need reminders.
100%.
That quote stuck with me. I heard that quote, I don't know how many decades ago, and it really stuck with me and has kept me more open-minded, I think, as I learn more.
Yeah, it absolutely has. And I think empathy, sympathy is so much about looking down, and empathy is so much about looking up together.
Yeah, that's
Like
good.
I
I like
really
that.
think that's such a big part of it. And I think, some of us are really good with empathy, in the business world and when we're in certain situations, but then we get not so good with it with our families, right? Or
Yeah,
vice
yeah,
versa.
yep, yep.
I think, there even people who are great at this in certain scenarios can use some reminders in other scenarios. So I think this is really a good podcast for anyone who is a leader, leads people indirectly, all of those things. Um, so let's get into it. Action
Okay.
step 1, mastering the active listening framework.
Yep.
Active listening is so important. I remember learning about it in my
Mm-hmm.
teenage years in little leadership seminars, and it
Mm-hmm.
has stayed true to be important even more so today.
Right.
Um, and what we're really talking about is being present.
Yep.
Being present in our conversations, in our talks, in our leadership, and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, for sure. And this next one, it's you can call it a technique, and I'm cautious using the word technique or using techniques when you're dealing with people because you can become too robotic. But I think it does serve a good purpose if it's done correctly. It's like I look at it being a good actor or being a horrible actor. If you're a great actor, people don't know you're acting. And I think using this and what it is, and that's a big pre-frame of to tell you what it is, but it's repeat and validate. So when you're talking with somebody and you're really trying to understand them, repeating back to them what you heard will help clarify,
Mm.
because oftentimes they may have said it differently, you may have heard it differently, or both happens. And then so the act of repeating what you think you heard helps get the understanding. I mean, think of it this way. If you text somebody something, how many different ways can you take that text? Especially if you don't really know them real well. Like if you and I text, we're fine. I mean, we don't need any
Yeah.
explanation, right? But if let's say you sort of know somebody and they text you and they're not really good at wording things, you could take offense to something that they didn't mean to offend you at all, but you could take offense. And this is kind of the same thing. Now, this is obviously live, this is in person, and that's what this helps with is repeating and validating what they said.
Yeah, and I think, when you talk about tactics and things like that, I think, when dealing with people, a lot of our natural desire, right? And you go back to Dale Carnegie,
Mhm.
everyone's most natural desire in the world is the craving for significance.
Right.
So what do most people do? What do average people do when they're in a conversation? They speak way more than they ask questions or listen.
Yep.
Right? I mean,
Yep.
we all know people like that. It's not a negative against the person. You're just itching that need. And part of developing leadership skills is really about learning that the other person also has that need, right? And
Right.
helping them express that need is going to make you a better listener, a better person of understanding, and better able to help in the long run. But I think, when it comes to repeating and validating, I think when someone says, "Hey, I have a problem with this," we immediately go to answer mode. because we want to
Right.
help. Like
Yeah.
we are
Yeah.
a system of people who want to help. So we
Yeah.
say, oh, just do this, do this, do this. But if you didn't understand what their actual issue was or what their
Hmm.
concern was, it, answering doesn't help.
Yeah. Or if you have a wife,
They
just listen.
just want to just listen, just be a listener. It's okay.
And I don't even think I have that down after almost 30 years. I still catch myself fixing the problem because that's what I do at the dojo all the time,
Hmm.
you know. But yeah, so this one I need a lot of work on still, but it's a great tool. The other part of this, and this is definitely a new phenomenon in the past 10, 15 years, and that's you have to remove the digital barrier, meaning
Yeah,
put your phone away. When you're having dinner, lunch, whatever with somebody, coffee with somebody, unless you're waiting for something important, you should not be on your phone with that person if they're in front of you. You should be totally engaged. If you said, let's get coffee and we budgeted an hour, spend that hour uninterrupted. Again, unless you have something, like in your business is a little different because you get calls and you have to, during the day, you have to be ready to take most of the calls, right? If you're a doctor on call, that would be different. But for most of us, it's not that way. We just have the habit of always looking down. Every time it bings and gives us a notification, we look at it,
yeah,
so that's another one because people, if you're on your phone and you're having a conversation with somebody,
yeah.
they know that you're not 100% engaged with them and they feel it.
It's funny. So I'm fortunate enough to be able to like work in an office with my spouse, and
Yeah.
one of the things with that is there's always technology around. And
Right.
I remember when I got my new computer, which is the one I'm using now. It had a feature, so like when we talk, I try to turn away from my computer and make
Yeah.
eye contact with my wife, my team, whoever I'm talking to.
Right.
But I noticed what my computer did is it had a feature for power saving. I'm going to go quote unquote air quotes power
Yeah.
saving. That if you look away from it, it would dim, and then when you looked
Okay.
at it, it would brighten back up.
Okay.
And I noticed what that was doing was it was triggering me when it would dim to look at the screen to brighten it back up.
Oh.
So I kept like, we'd be mid conversation. I would just turn my head back to my computer and turn away, turn back, turn away. So I turned that feature off. Like I found how to turn that feature off, and it made a big difference because then it wasn't distracting. And like you said, I mean, the bing of our phone, right,
Right.
is it's like Pavlovian, where we
Yeah.
immediately look at our phone because we need to know what that message is. And
Yeah.
I think there's definitely professions that have that, but I would recommend to people that you should assume your profession is not one of them.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Right.
short of somebody like needing a kidney immediately,
Right.
um, but outside of that, I think most people can just like, an hour. You can go an hour coffee without looking at your phone. I promise. Like things
I love how you went really far with that.
really far, like
The
really.
needing a kidney.
Unless you are in the active donor waiting line and you don't answer right away, you're not getting that.
Yeah.
You can probably go an hour without looking at your phone during the day. So I digress on removing the digital barrier, but please remove the digital barrier.
Yeah.
Um, Getting an action item number two, perspective taking agility,
Yeah.
right? Leaders have to be able to really step out of their own shoes.
Hmm.
And I think this is so important. Just like a quick aside, I talk about this with my team when we talk about marketing all the time
Hmm.
because I don't know what it is with real estate agents, but they sometimes they say, "Well, what if I did this?" My first question is not would it work, would it not work? It's how would you feel if you were receiving that?
Yeah.
If you were on the
Yeah.
receiving end of it,
Hmm.
and I think that's really being the ability to put yourself in the other person's shoes is such a huge skill that we forget about.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And um the other thing, part of this too, is especially if you're working with people, and let's say you have different layers, and depending on how you go, where you're the leader, obviously, the more people you have working for you, there's more layers. Is either work doing what they do,
Yeah.
for a little bit, or talk to them. like factory work. Some of the best factories are ran by leaders that walk the factory floor,
Yeah.
talk to the people that are actually doing the hard work and seeing, hey, what do you need? What's going on? Anytime a leader has done that, that factory flourishes.
Yeah.
Anytime they just sit up in their office, and they're like just running by the numbers and this needs to be more efficient, it doesn't. So take it to a smaller perspective in your office. If you're not doing any, let's say for you stop doing cold calls. Hey, that's beneath me. Not that you did, right? That's beneath me. I don't need to do cold calls, but all your other people need to.
Yeah.
You don't know how the cold calls are going now because they
Yeah.
change. I mean, I know in the martial arts, the clients that I'm getting, the prospects that are getting, and because you helped me out, are different than they were 5 years ago or 10 years ago. They're
Yeah.
asking different questions. They want different things. Now we have COVID kids now doing karate, and those parents are different than the pre-COVID. So we have to adapt. And if we didn't do those things, we wouldn't know as a leader how to adapt and how to train and
Yeah.
how to get better. So that's an important thing.
And I mean that, like, why do I love going out and teaching, in the classes, is because it
Yep.
gives me that perspective. Number one, it gives me perspective as to, what's going on. Kids are a little bit different. Parents' expectations are a
Right.
little bit different than they were 10
Hmm.
years ago. So
Yeah.
the dynamics of the floor is different. But also, like, when I give, the staff tips, like teaching tips, like what you do, I mean, we know because we've done it recently.
Yeah.
Like, we can say
Yeah.
this. I send an email out to my real estate team every Monday. This is what I'm doing right now that works in my business. It's not
Yep.
this is what I did 30 years ago. Like, this is what I do now. So understanding that level that they're at because you're doing that work is great.
Hmm.
Now, you still have to do high level stuff. Don't get tied up there, but
Yeah. Right.
for
Right.
empathy
Right.
purposes, you really need to understand, and then I think another part of this is having that emotional context, especially really all across life. I wanted to say, especially as an employer, but really even in family. Like, if somebody's not performing the way that you want them to perform or
Hmm.
behaving the way you want them to behave, a lot of times it could be something completely unrelated. So being able to say, like, what's going on in this person's life outside of this situation.
Yeah. Hmm.
I mean, I have teenage girls, right? Like, the number of times they're mad at me
Yeah.
is amazing, but so much time, or so often, it has nothing to do with me.
Right.
So if I just say, hey, you're not treating me very well today, like, without understanding the other things that are going on.
Yeah.
And listen, they treat me well 99% of the time, but there are times when, like, they're kids with hormones and things like that.
Right.
But I have to assume it could be something else and say, hey, what's going on? Like, are you okay? Simon Sinek always has to do this with employees. Like, if somebody's not performing to the level, sit them down and just ask how they're doing.
Hmm.
Understand what's going on in their life outside of the task you're giving them.
Right. Yep. That's huge, and that's one of the teaching tips that I always talk about is when you're trying to correct or discipline a child, especially, is ask them, is everything okay today? And sometimes that snaps them out of it, or sometimes, oh my God, my fish died and I'm so sad. And to a child, whether it's a fish or their dog, I mean, that's huge. And that's why
Yeah,
they're not performing in class. And so that's having empathy and understanding of what they're going through. And then oftentimes they perform better because they know you care.
yeah,
You know, the last part of this action step is when you have conflicts with teammates, and let's say they're having a conflict, you're not having a conflict with one of your staff, is when it arises, the intent versus the impact. So it's like when somebody says, "Hey, Mark, with all due respect," and then they proceed to insult you.
uh-huh,
That doesn't get them out of when they say, "With all due respect." You know,
yeah,
um, so you have to remind people, sometimes teach people that just because your intent was to make more money for the company, but how you went about it ruined a bunch of relationships within the company. That doesn't like say, oh, that's fine then. Hey, you made us a bunch of money. it's okay that you ruin the culture of the company, right? And so it's important that you're looking for that. And the same thing with families. Um, Words are just words. However, some words you can't take back.
Right.
So you got to be really careful what you say to somebody, and especially somebody that you care about and you love deeply. You can really hurt them, and that can stay with them for a long, long time, if not forever.
Yeah.
And so you got to be really careful with that.
So I always think about, I remember, I think you taught me this, but um, communication is, and I'm not going to do the percentages because I'm going to get it wrong, but communication is three parts. The large part being body language, kind
Hmm.
of the middle part being voice quality, charisma, enthusiasm, and that part. And then
Right.
like the last 7% being the words you say, being like the
Yeah.
least important part of communication.
Hmm.
And I think people hear that and they go, oh, so the words don't really matter. No, the words do matter, right?
Yeah,
Like
they do.
communication is 100%. So
Yeah,
making sure that, we are getting better at picking the right words and saying things in an empathetic way, I think will just make us better leaders.
for sure. For
Um,
sure.
and now really, getting into step three, which is what we're going to say is the hard side of the soft
Yep.
skills, right?
Hmm.
Putting in an operation, because without action, without doing anything, number one, this podcast is about taking action. So it's all about that. But without action, that empathy is just sympathy.
Right.
So we really need to make sure we're
Hmm.
doing something. So talking about, removing the roadblocks is the first part of this, and
Hmm.
ending every session with the question, what's an obstacle in your way right now that I can help you with? And I think this is so powerful. Even if you just say, what can I help you with right now? And the number of times I do this in my family, my team, anytime something comes up, like, how can I help? Are my four favorite words. How can Right. I think if
Yeah.
you live your life with a how can I help attitude, you will be successful. And I love this part. Remove those roadblocks for people.
I love it when people say, I have three words for you, and then they use four or
Seven
five.
words. Yeah. Maybe a number. I don't know.
Uh, so the next part of this, the next bullet point would be tailoring your recognition, and this is important. Team, and you can certainly use this with family too. With your kids. I wouldn't recommend with your spouse necessarily, but with your team, and we know this with our students that some students love public recognition. Other students don't, and so learning what they need, what they like, do they like to be pointed out in front of the class? Hey, Johnny, look at Johnny. He did an awesome stance. His kata was flawless. Other people just like you coming up to him at the end of class and say, Mark, that was a great performance. I'm very, very proud of you. That was so much better. You're moving in the right direction, and obviously there's all in between those two ends. But knowing your team, knowing your family, with your two girls, which one can you say this to and which one do you have to say that to? It's going to be different. Even though they're raised by the same parents and they're not that far of an age spread, they're different. They're very different. And I know them, and I know and they're students, and I know how different they are.
And the public praise of "I'm so proud of you. I'm going to post your picture on Instagram," is not the way to go. At least with
Right.
mine. But yeah, I think that's great. Really, I personally, I'm not a big fan of public recognition for myself. But if
Right.
somebody gives me a $10 gift card to a coffee shop and says, "Hey, great work," awesome. I'm happy.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I think that's such an important part, is understanding how people like to be praised
Right.
and scratching that itch for them the right way.
Right. For
Um,
sure.
and then really getting into, kind of that healthy boundary framework, because I think,
Hmm.
this can, right, turn into like a get out of trouble free card.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And I think empathy is really about holding that high standard, because, you believe in their potential. I said in the beginning, I think empathy is not about looking down at somebody and
Right.
saying, "Oh, I feel bad for you." It's about looking up
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
them being,
Hmm.
the prime part of this is like, I'm empathetic because I believe in you, and I'm going to hold you to the standard, right? That I believe in you, and the standard that you're setting for yourself. And that's why I think all these steps are important, because I think understanding the that level that they're setting for themselves, saying, I can do this. I know this is the way I want to go. These are the roadblocks. Let's do this. Not just, sitting there and every time they have a problem,
Hmm.
being the punching bag for them. I think having
Right.
that boundary of holding them to that standard is so important.
Right. Yep. Yep. And I love the fact that empathy is really the competitive advantage.
Yeah.
And so many companies don't know that, don't realize that, and
Yeah.
especially if you're a small company like ours, this is, I think, easy to implement because you don't have the numbers, and hopefully the culture is already in line with that. It's more that mom and pop organization, like like both of our companies, like both of us are, and you guys are you're literally a mom and pop because your
Literally, we
wife works
are a
with you.
mom and a pop.
Yeah. And so it's such a competitive advantage because it's not seen in the world oftentimes.
Yeah.
And if a company has to pay their employees so much and it's all about money, that's just it's just a losing proposition eventually, because eventually you run out of money as a company.
Yeah.
However, if you can, pay a good wage, but also the culture of the company is great. People love being there. They're getting a lot more than just money from there. Obviously money's important. They have to be able to pay their bills, but if you can add the other part, that's actually it's free. It just takes effort. It takes planning and really having that empathy in there. That can make a huge difference in your company.
It really, and, I mean, and like I'm thinking about this, and in your family. I mean,
Hmm.
the cool thing about empathy, if you really want a competitive edge in your family life, I think empathy is one of those things. And I think the great thing about, why this is such an important quality of a leader is because we're leading by example. People take our lead,
Right.
and I think about, those moments where I've been empathetic and there's people I think of in my head, like, what would this person have done in this situation?
Yeah.
To make this productive. And I think if not for those leaders that I had that were
Hmm.
empathetic, would I be as empathetic as I am now? And I think that's
Right.
really important. So definitely, top seven qualities of a leader. Definitely this is, such a huge part of it. So
Yeah.
let's review. So number one, action item one, active listening, right? Listen 80% of the time, speak 20% of the time, and
Hmm.
make some of that 20% asking them questions. Some
Right.
of those questions being repeating and validating. So making sure we
Hmm.
understand, what they're talking about, and then removing that digital barrier. You are not that important that something terrible is going to happen if you don't check your phone every 5 minutes.
Right.
If you are, assume you're not. Maybe you are. If you are, that's okay. But really, like, get rid of that digital barrier.
Right. Yep. Action step two is developing the perspective taking agility. And that what that's talking about is um, having that shadow experience, meaning that you're doing jobs that are, and I don't mean to use the word beneath you, but lower level than you, that you've already worked through, but doing that and talking to people that are on the front lines of your company and really figuring out what do they need, what's their perspective of things, and that can really grow your company tremendously. um, Doing the emotional check-in, so if somebody's underperforming, before you jump to conclusions, hey, Mark, you didn't do this, you didn't make this call, you didn't do that. What the heck is wrong with you? You've been like this for a whole week. Oh yeah, my dog died. Oh, okay. And how
Yeah.
how would you feel, right? I mean that can happen, So instead of leading with that, lead in with a check-in. Hey, is everything okay? I noticed you've been off this week. And then now you're open up to tell you.
Yeah.
And then the last one is if there's disagreements in your family or in your work, is really work on the intent versus the impact. If somebody uses the excuse, well, my intent was to make more money for the company. Well, what was the impact? That you just made everybody in the company mad, and the culture is ruined because you wanted to do this. So your
Yeah.
intent isn't the excuse. You have to look at the impact that you're making on people. And that's an important balance.
Yeah, and then number three, operationalizing compassion. So putting the hard side to the soft skills, helping people remove roadblocks. How can I help? Right? How can I help? What can I do to make this easier for you? What can I do to help? Tailoring that recognition, making sure that when they're making progress, you're praising them in the right way. Not everybody wants that public round of applause. Some people just want
Right.
a pat on the back,
Hmm.
but understand, and some people do want the public round of applause. So understanding that's important. And then just making sure you keep those healthy boundaries. You want to make sure that, empathy is helping them look in the right direction and
Hmm.
move the way that they want to move. That way, everybody's moving forward as a team and you're actually helping them out of the thing, not staying in there with them.
Right.
So I think that's super important. Empathy, the ultimate competitive advantage.
Mhm.
So thank you for listening, everybody. Please share this with somebody you know that's a leader, even if they don't know they're a leader. Share this with them, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Hop over to our website at www.achieveresultsnow.com to get your free copy of our book, Ignite Results, 4 specific daily actions to help you achieve results now. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Achieve Results Now. Thanks for listening, commenting, and subscribing. Now get out there and achieve results now.